The dust from Sarah's taillights hadn't even settled before the silence hit me like a physical blow. I stood there on that desolate stretch of Highway 47, my overnight bag at my feet, watching my daughter's silver Honda disappear around the bend. The September sun beat down mercilessly, and the only sound was the occasional semi-roaring past, buffeting me with hot wind. I'm 63 years old. I've survived a husband's death, raised 3 children alone, worked 2 jobs for 15 years, and put all of them through college. I've never been the kind of woman who crumbles easily. But standing there, abandoned like unwanted luggage, I felt something crack inside me that I didn't know could break. It had started so innocently. Sarah had called me 3 weeks earlier, her voice bright with enthusiasm. According to YouTube analytics, 99.6% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Mom, I've been thinking. We never got to take that mother-daughter trip we always talked about. Remember? You always said you wanted to see the Grand Canyon. My heart had swelled. Since her father died 5 years ago, Sarah and I had drifted. She was busy with her marketing career, her husband, Derek, their new house in the suburbs. Our conversations had become perfunctory, obligatory. This felt like an olive branch, a chance to reconnect. "I'd love that, honey," I'd said, already mentally rearranging my schedule at the library where I worked part-time. We'd planned it meticulously. Or rather, Sarah had planned it. She'd book the hotels, map the route, handle all the details. "Just pack your bags, Mom. Let me take care of you for once." Those words had made me cry. Finally, my daughter saw me as someone worth taking care of, not just the eternal caretaker. The first 2 days had been magical. We'd laughed more than we had in years, shared stories, listened to old music from her childhood. We stayed in a charming bed and breakfast in Colorado, walked through mountain towns, ate ice cream like we used to when she was little. I felt young again, necessary again, loved again. Then came the morning of the 3rd day. We'd been driving through increasingly remote terrain when Sarah pulled into a rest stop. "I need to use the bathroom," she said. "Want anything from the vending machines?" "Just some water," I'd replied, scrolling through photos on my phone, smiling at the selfies we'd taken. She came back 15 minutes later, but something had shifted. Her jaw was tight, her movements jerky. She barely spoke as we got back on the road. I tried to engage her in conversation, but received only monosyllabic responses. An hour later, she pulled over, right there on that God-forsaken stretch of nothing. "Mom, I need you to get out." I'd laughed. It was so absurd. "What? Why? Is something wrong with the car?" "No." Her hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "I need you to get out. Now." "Sarah, what's going on? Did I say something?" "Get out!" The scream tore from her throat with such violence that I flinched. I'd never heard my daughter sound like that. Her face was blotchy, tears streaming down her cheeks, but her eyes were hard as granite. Shaking, I unbuckled my seatbelt. "Honey, please, talk to me. Whatever's wrong. Take your bag, take your phone, get out of my car." I obeyed, moving like a sleepwalker. The moment my overnight bag hit the gravel shoulder, she gunned the engine. I called her name. She didn't look back. That was 4 hours ago. I'd managed to walk to a small gas station 2 miles down the road, my feet blistering in my canvas sneakers. The attendant, a kind young man with worried eyes, had let me use his phone to call my son, Michael. "I'm in Denver, Mom. It'll take me at least 12 hours to get to you. Can you get to a motel? I'll wire you money." The nearest town was Bellwood, population 847, according to the faded sign. The motel was called the Desert Rose, and it smelled like old carpet and broken dreams. I sat on the bed, still in shock, trying to make sense of what had happened. Sarah wouldn't answer my calls. They went straight to voicemail. I left messages, each one more desperate than the last. Please, baby, just tell me what I did wrong. We can fix this. Whatever it is, we can fix it. But deep down, in the part of my mind that had started working again, I knew. This wasn't spontaneous. You don't plan a trip for 3 weeks, drive someone hundreds of miles from home, and abandon them over a sudden argument. This was calculated. This was cruel. This was meant to hurt. Michael arrived the next afternoon, his face etched with exhaustion and fury. He held me while I finally let myself cry. Great heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and primal. "I'll kill her," he kept saying. "I swear to God, Mom, I'll kill her." "Don't," I whispered. "She's your sister." "She's a monster." During the long drive back to my home in Phoenix, I tried to piece it together. Had I criticized her marriage, her career choices, her house? I replayed every conversation from the trip, examining each word like evidence. I came up empty. Michael stayed with me for 2 days, making sure I ate, fielding calls from my youngest daughter, Rebecca, in Portland, who was equally horrified. But neither of them had heard from Sarah either. She'd gone dark. On the 4th day, I was alone again in my small ranch house, the one I'd bought after selling the family home, the one I'd downsized to because I didn't need much space, because my children had their own lives now. I was watering my tomato plants when I saw Derek's truck pull up. My son-in-law looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, 10 years older than his 41 years. "Ellen," he said, and his voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was going to do that. I swear I didn't know." "What's going on, Derek? Please, just tell me what's happening." He sat down heavily on my porch step. "She found something. In your house, I think. Or she heard something. She won't tell me exactly what, but she's convinced. God, this is so messed up." He ran his hands through his hair. "She thinks you killed her father." The world tilted. "What?" "The heart attack. She found something that made her think it wasn't natural, that you somehow caused it." I sat down beside him, my legs giving out. "James had a heart attack in his sleep. The doctors confirmed it. The autopsy confirmed it. He had advanced coronary artery disease. He'd refused to take his medication properly, refused to change his diet. How could she possibly think? I don't know. She won't show me what she found. But she's been obsessed, Ellen. She's been going through old papers, medical records, talking to some private investigator. She's convinced herself of this narrative, and nothing I say makes a difference." "Where is she now?" "At home. She told me if I came to see you, not to come back." Something hardened in my chest then. Something cold and sharp and utterly unlike anything I'd felt before. My daughter had left me on a remote road, not in a fit of passion, but because she believed I was a murderer. She'd planned a trip with me, smiled at me, hugged me, all while believing I'd killed her father. And she'd condemned me without trial, without even confronting me with her evidence. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. "You should go home to your wife." "Ellen, Go home, Derek." After he left, I sat on that porch until the sun set. I thought about James, my husband of 35 years, how I'd begged him to see a cardiologist, how I'd hidden vegetables in his food, tried to portion control, replaced his coffee with decaf, how I'd found him that morning, already cold, and how part of me had been relieved that his suffering was over, even as I shattered with grief. I thought about Sarah as a little girl, how she'd climb into our bed during thunderstorms, how she'd make me construction paper cards on Mother's Day, how she'd called me crying from college when her first boyfriend broke her heart. I thought about the woman who'd looked at me with such hatred on that highway, and I made my decision. The next morning, I called a locksmith. Every lock in my house was changed by noon. I went to my bank and modified my will, removing Sarah entirely. I contacted my lawyer and updated all my medical directives, specifically excluding Sarah from any decision-making capacity. Then I went further. Sarah had a key to my safe deposit box, something I'd given all my children in case of emergency. I had the box emptied and closed, opening a new one at a different bank. Inside were things she'd expect to inherit: my mother's wedding ring, family photos, the deed to a small plot of land in Montana that had been in my family for generations. I called my financial advisor and restructured my modest portfolio, splitting everything between Michael and Rebecca. I removed Sarah from every social media account, every family photo album online, every digital trace of her in my life. When Michael called, concerned about my silence, I told him calmly what I'd done. "Mom, don't you think that's a bit extreme? She's sick with grief and paranoia, but she's still your daughter." "She was my daughter," I said. "The woman who abandoned me on that road is a stranger." I didn't stop there. I began reaching out to family members, not to badmouth Sarah, but simply to tell them the truth about what happened. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my sister in Ohio. I recounted the facts plainly, without embellishment. I didn't have to exaggerate. The truth was damning enough. Within days, Sarah found herself cut off from the extended family she'd grown up with. Invitations stopped. Phone calls went unreturned. When she tried to explain her theory about her father's death, she was met with cold skepticism. James's death had been thoroughly investigated. There was no evidence of foul play because there had been no foul play. But I still wasn't done. Sarah worked in marketing at a mid-sized firm that valued family-oriented employees. Her boss, Martin Crenshaw, had met me several times at company events. I'd brought homemade cookies to the Christmas party just last year. I called him. "Martin, I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted you to hear this from me directly." I explained what had happened, my voice steady. "I'm not asking you to do anything. I just thought you should know the kind of person you have representing your company. Someone who would abandon their elderly mother on a highway over paranoid delusions." Martin was appropriately shocked. "Ellen, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "Of course you didn't. Sarah is very good at presenting a certain image. I don't know what, if anything, Martin did with that information. But Sarah's trajectory at that company suddenly stalled. Projects went to other team members. She was excluded from key meetings. Her performance review, which should have led to a promotion, instead resulted in a needs improvement rating. I found out later that Martin had quietly mentioned the situation to HR, and HR had noted it in her file. Not as official discipline, but as a character concern. In corporate America, that's as good as a scarlet letter. 2 weeks after the highway abandonment, Sarah showed up at my house. She pounded on the door, rang the bell incessantly, screamed my name. I watched her from my bedroom window, my phone in hand, ready to call the police. Mom, I know you're in there. We need to talk." I didn't move. "I found the insurance policy. I know what you did. You collected $500,000 when Dad died." I almost laughed. Yes, there had been a life insurance policy. James and I had taken it out 30 years ago, when the children were small. We'd both been beneficiaries on each other's policies. It was called being responsible adults. She stayed for an hour, alternating between fury and tears. Eventually, Derek came and coaxed her back to the car. I watched him drive away, her face pressed against the window, pale and desperate, felt nothing. The calls started after that, late-night calls from numbers I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was Sarah, her voice slurred with wine or pills or both, ranting about betrayal, about evidence, about justice. I recorded every call. I documented every incident. I built a case. My lawyer sent her a cease and desist letter. The calls stopped, but the emails began. Rambling manifestos about how I'd manipulated her father, isolated him, controlled his medical care, maybe even poisoned him slowly over years. It would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. The woman was having a complete psychological break, and part of me, the part that was still a mother, wanted to get her help. But the larger part, the part that had been betrayed and abandoned, had turned to stone. Michael and Rebecca tried to play peacemaker. They organized a family meeting, begged me to attend. I refused. "She left me on a highway," I said simply. "Nothing else matters." "She's sick, Mom. She needs help." "Then get her help. But I'm done." The breaking point came 6 weeks after the abandonment. Sarah filed a police report accusing me of elder abuse and fraud. She claimed I'd coerced James into changing his will before his death, that I'd isolated him from friends and family, that I'd neglected his medical needs. The police investigated. They interviewed James's doctors, his friends, our neighbors. They reviewed medical records, financial statements, phone logs. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. The detective assigned to the case, a weary woman in her 50s named Gonzalez, came to my house to tell me the case was closed. "Your daughter needs psychiatric help," she said bluntly. "These accusations are baseless. But ma'am, if she continues this harassment, you need to file a restraining order." "I know. I mean it. This is escalating. People in her state can become dangerous." I filed for the restraining order the next day. The hearing was surreal. Sarah showed up with a box of evidence: printouts from medical websites about undetectable poisons, copies of the insurance policy with sections highlighted, rambling journal entries she'd written. Her lawyer, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, tried to present a coherent case, but failed miserably. My lawyer barely had to speak. The judge granted the order within 15 minutes. As Sarah was escorted from the courtroom, she turned to look at me one last time. Our eyes met across that sterile space, and for just a moment I saw my little girl again. Scared, confused, lost. Then she opened her mouth. "You're a murderer, and God will punish you." The little girl was gone. I felt the last thread connecting us snap like a rotten rope. Derek filed for divorce the following week. The strain had broken their marriage beyond repair. He'd tried to get Sarah into therapy, but she'd refused. She'd accused him of conspiring with me, of being blinded by my manipulation. She'd made their home a battleground of paranoia and rage. I heard through Michael that Sarah had lost her job. The combination of poor performance, erratic behavior, and a police investigation, even one that cleared me, had been too much. The company let her go quietly, with a severance package and an NDA. She moved into a small apartment, sold the house in the divorce. Derek kept the dog. 3 months after she left me on that highway, Sarah hit bottom. She was found unconscious in her apartment by the landlord, an empty bottle of sleeping pills on the nightstand. Not enough to kill her, but enough to show intent. Michael called me from the hospital. "She's asking for you." "No." "Mom, she tried to kill herself." "That's not my problem anymore." "Jesus Christ, how can you be so cold?" "She made her choice when she left me on that road. I've made mine." I hung up before he could argue further. Sarah was committed to a psychiatric facility for 72 hours, then transferred to a longer-term treatment program. The diagnosis was complex: delusional disorder, complicated grief, possible early-onset dementia, exacerbated by stress. The doctors couldn't say for certain what had triggered the break, but they suspected it had been building for years, since James's death. None of it changed my mind. Rebecca flew out from Portland, angry and desperate. "She's sick, Mom. Mentally ill. You can't just abandon her. She abandoned me first. You're her mother, and she accused me of murder. She tried to destroy my life, my reputation, my peace. Because of what? A paranoid delusion? That doesn't absolve her. Mental illness isn't a free pass for cruelty. So what? You're just done? She's dead to you? I thought about that. Yes. Rebecca left without saying goodbye. Time moved on. Sarah completed her treatment program, was released with medications and strict orders to continue therapy. She moved to California, as far from Phoenix as she could get while staying in the continental U.S. I heard she got a job at a small nonprofit, something low stress, working with animals. She sent me a letter 6 months later. It arrived on a Tuesday, forwarded through my lawyer because she didn't have my current address. Dear Mom, I'm writing this knowing you probably won't read it, or if you do, you won't care. But my therapist says I need to try. I was sick. I am sick. I have a disease that makes me believe things that aren't true, that twists my memories and perceptions until I can't tell reality from delusion. It's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. I thought I was protecting Dad's memory. I thought I was seeking justice. Instead, I destroyed everything. I destroyed us. I know I can never take back what I did. I left you on that highway like you were garbage, like you weren't the woman who gave me life, who raised me, who loved me even when I was unlovable. I accused you of the most horrible things. I tried to ruin you. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think I deserve it. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The medications help. The therapy helps. I can see now how warped my thinking was, how paranoid and cruel I became. I mourn the person I was before this illness took hold. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. If you don't, I understand. I'll carry this guilt for the rest of my life, and maybe that's what I deserve. I love you, Mom. I never stopped, even when I was at my worst. I hope someday you can believe that. Sarah, I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and didn't think about it again. Almost. The truth is, I thought about it constantly. Late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd take it out and read it again. I'd examine her handwriting, looking for traces of the daughter I'd known. Sometimes I'd start to write a response, filling pages with anger, grief, longing. I never sent any of them. Michael and Rebecca slowly rebuilt their relationships with me, though things remained strained. They saw Sarah occasionally, reported that she was doing better, staying on her medications, working steadily. They never pushed me to reconcile, having learned that lesson the hard way. A year passed, then 2. I sold my house and moved to a retirement community, one of those active adult places where everyone is over 55, and the biggest drama is the pickleball tournament. I made new friends who knew nothing about my daughter, my abandonment, my revenge. I was happy, or at least I was content. The sharp edges of my life had been smoothed away. I existed in a pleasant, controlled bubble. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Inoperable. 6 months, maybe less. I sat in the oncologist's office, listening to words like palliative care and end-of-life planning, and felt oddly calm. I'd lived a full life. I'd raised 3 children, buried a husband, worked hard, loved deeply. If this was the end, so be it. Michael and Rebecca were devastated. They rallied around me, helped me arrange hospice care, began the sad work of sorting through my possessions. "Does Sarah know?" Rebecca asked quietly one afternoon. "No, and she won't. Don't tell her." "Mom, she has a right to know you're dying." She lost that right when she left me on Highway 47. But Rebecca told her anyway. I found out later she'd wrestled with the decision for weeks, before finally calling Sarah. Mother loyalty versus sister loyalty. She chose sisterhood. Sarah showed up at my door 3 weeks before I died. I was in bed by then, the pain managed by a morphine drip, my body a fragile shell of what it had been. The hospice nurse, a kind woman named Paula, came to my bedside. "There's a woman here to see you. Says she's your daughter. Sarah?" Every instinct screamed to send her away. To deny her even this, the deathbed reconciliation she'd traveled halfway across the country to attempt. But I was tired, so incredibly tired. "Let her in." Sarah looked awful. Older than her 42 years, thin, her hair streaked with premature gray, but her eyes were clear. No paranoia, no delusion, just bottomless grief. She sat in the chair beside my bed, her hands twisting in her lap. "Hi, Mom." "Sarah." We stared at each other across the chasm of 3 years. "I know you don't want me here," she said finally. "I know I don't have the right, but I couldn't let you die without trying one more time to tell you how sorry I am. You wrote me a letter. I know, but saying it to your face, it matters more." I said nothing, conserving my energy. "I destroyed everything," she continued, her voice breaking. "My marriage, my career, my family. But worst of all, I destroyed us. The thing I treasured most in the world, and I burned it to the ground because my brain was lying to me. Mental illness isn't an excuse. No, it's not. But it's the truth. I had a psychotic break, Mom. The doctors think it was triggered by unresolved grief over Dad, exacerbated by stress, and maybe some genetic predisposition. I wasn't in my right mind." "You planned that trip for 3 weeks." "I did. The delusions had been building for months. I convinced myself I was going to confront you somewhere remote, make you confess. It was all so clear in my sick mind, this narrative where you were the villain and I was the hero seeking justice. It made perfect sense until it didn't. And when did it stop making sense?" "About 10 minutes after I drove away from you." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I pulled over a mile down the road and vomited. I knew what I'd done was wrong, but I couldn't reconcile that with my certainty that you were guilty. So I pushed it down, doubled down on the delusion. The further I went, the worse it got." I closed my eyes, exhausted. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Sarah whispered. "I just need you to know that I loved you. Even when I was accusing you of terrible things, some part of me, the real me, loved you. And that part has been screaming for 3 years. You really think you're 2 different people? The sick Sarah and the real Sarah? I think I'm one person who did terrible things because her brain was broken. I own that. I accept responsibility. But I'm also asking you to remember who I was before and who I'm trying to be now." I opened my eyes and really looked at her. At my daughter, who'd been broken and had fought her way back to something resembling whole. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" "I want you to know I'm sorry. I want you to believe that. And if there's any part of you that can forgive me, even a little, I want that too. But mostly, I just want to sit with you while there's still time." I thought about the locks I'd changed, the will I'd modified, the family I'd turned against her. I thought about my revenge, how complete it had been, how satisfying. And I thought about lying in this bed, dying alone except for professional caregivers, having pushed away one of the people who'd loved me most in the world. Pride is a bitter thing to swallow when you're dying. "You can stay," I said finally. "For a little while." Sarah's sob was pure relief. She reached for my hand, and I didn't pull away. We talked for an hour, then 2. She told me about her treatment, her new life, the ways she'd tried to make amends. I told her about my anger, my hurt, the vindictive pleasure I'd taken in dismantling her life. "I deserved it," she said simply. All of it. Maybe. But I didn't deserve what you did to me either. No, you didn't. When visiting hours ended, Paula came to usher Sarah out. My daughter stood, reluctant to leave. Can I come back tomorrow? I hesitated, old wounds still raw. Then I nodded. She came back every day for the next 3 weeks, until I died on a Thursday morning with all 3 of my children at my bedside. In those final weeks, we didn't fully reconcile. How could we? The wounds were too deep, the betrayal too fundamental. But we found something, not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps understanding. An acknowledgement that love and damage can coexist, that family bonds can fray without breaking entirely. I never changed my will back. Sarah never asked me to. She seemed to understand that some consequences are permanent, that forgiveness doesn't erase the past. On my last day, when I could barely speak, Sarah leaned close. I love you, Mom. I'm so sorry. I squeezed her hand weakly. It wasn't absolution, but it was something. I know, I whispered, and then I let go. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. They don't tell you it tastes like ashes in your mouth when you're dying, surrounded by the wreckage of relationships you destroyed in the name of justice. I got my revenge. I made Sarah pay for what she did to me. I took everything from her systematically, methodically, without mercy. But in the end, as I lay in that hospice bed, I wondered, who had really lost more? Sarah had lost me, her mother, her rock, her foundation. But she'd found treatment, built a new life, learned to manage her illness. I had lost her, my daughter, my firstborn, the child I'd loved before she even drew breath. And in the process of making her suffer, I'd lost parts of myself I could never reclaim. The locks I changed could be changed again. The will could be modified, the family could be mended, but those 3 years of estrangement, of mutual destruction, those were gone forever. Perhaps that's the real cost of revenge. Not the damage you inflict on your enemy, but the person you become while inflicting it. I died bitter and vindicated and alone in the ways that mattered most. Sarah lived, scarred but healing, having lost everything and found herself. Sometimes I wonder who really won. Most times, I know we both lost.